You're listening to the Neurocareers Doing the Impossible podcast with Dr. K, episode number 16. Dear Neurocareer podcast listeners, it's time to dive into the careers in neuroscience and neurotechnologies. And today, we have two exceptional life stories that merge together to create an effective EEG brain training protocol with a wearable device that will be able to help people around the globe. Please welcome Chad Olin and G. Cole. Who would like to start with their story, Chad or G?
It's funny because we both have pretty interesting stories, and the intersection of them is also a very interesting story in and of itself. So yeah, I'm fine to start first, if that works, if that makes sense.
Yes, Chad, please.
And Melina, is there anything in particular, or just want to hear kind of how I came into the industry and the field? And
Yes, because you have very interesting career path coming into the neurotech. So it would be good to know for our listeners that these paths are available, that people can come to neuroscience, to neurotech from different fields. So it would be very interesting, how did you get to this neurotech company that you have created with G?
Absolutely, yeah. So my story starts working in finance. I actually spent about 5 years working in New York City in investment banking and private equity. Did not expect at that time that I would find myself in the neurotech industry or the travel industry, which is actually a little detour that I made on the way to neurotech for about 5 years. So it's more than a detour, I guess. But it was 5 years in finance. And then I went off to business school to Harvard to get an MBA. And before enrolling at Harvard, I went on a backpacking trip to Southeast Asia by myself, which was an interesting experience. And it was really the first time that I experienced a mindfulness retreat. So I enrolled in a 10-day silent meditation retreat, Vipassana. As your listeners may be familiar with, it was amazing. Experienced some really incredible practical benefits for my life of understanding the power of meditation and mindfulness to observe sensations and thoughts and feelings as impermanent. And as that observer, to really break any patterns that might lead to anxiety and stress. So really incredible practical benefits from that retreat, as well as some really cool and interesting spiritual experiences, a connection to oneness, a feeling of all the particles vibrating in my body, which I had no idea was even possible. And I went into this retreat really as a complete beginner in meditation. They walk you through all these steps to experience some really miraculous things. So it opened my mind to the power of mindfulness and meditation. And as I'm looking back now, the power of neuroplasticity in the brain and the mind, which we're really diving into deeply in what G and I are creating and what he has created. And so that was a big part of my story, was getting that initial experience with mindfulness in a really powerful way. And then to touch on my detour through the travel industry quickly, which actually led me to the neurotech field, really drawing upon the rest of that trip, the backpacking trip that I went on, was a travel experience. And I loved to travel up until that point in my life. And so I had the opportunity to go and spend this time really without much of any schedule or restrictions. And so I had some really amazing travel experiences in various countries, and it made me want to start a travel company, which I actually did. So fast forward through my time as an MBA student at Harvard, I decided to start a travel company. And in the first year as an entrepreneur of that business, I started to experience some pretty severe stress and anxiety. So this is something I think many entrepreneurs go through on some level. And I was no exception to that. And it was at that time that I met G at an event in Miami, where we are based. I was experiencing the stress, the anxiety, sleep issues, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of regret, comparisons to others, people that were in my class at Harvard who were going on to do really amazing things. And I was grinding it out as an entrepreneur. And so a lot of things I was working through, a lot of pressure I put on myself to succeed. And that certainly wasn't helping matters. And so it kind of led to a point in my life where I felt that everything was kind of do or die, this survival mode that I went into in my business endeavors, which gives me energy, right? To a degree, it can kind of give you a little boost, right? That cortisol, that adrenaline can focus you for a short period of time. But when you do it for years on end with no vacation and no financial stability and all these other factors, then in my case, it kind of got off the rails and started to become counterproductive to my life. And that was right at the time that I met G. And so I'll get into that story in a second, but just to kind of give the whole picture, I did have a meditation experience at that time. I did have a good practice. I'd done a deep dive into Vipassana, which is, a really intensive process. You're meditating for 100 hours silent over those 10 days. So I had a good meditation practice, but it wasn't enough. It was not enough to really manage what I was experiencing at that time in my life. And I met G at an event here in Miami for entrepreneurs. And he offered the group a free brainwave assessment. And he said that we could come in, he would read our brainwaves, he would provide some information about what that meant was happening for us, and perhaps suggest some sessions of his program to improve that assessment and to improve the way that we're feeling and functioning in our lives. It was a very intriguing offer. And so I took him up on that. I did the assessment. And it was mind-blowing, to say the least. So this assessment is where electrodes are placed on the brain. So these are EEG sensors, very standard sensors, nothing too special about the EEG technology, which has been around for decades, as you know. And through the sensors, there are electrical signals that are read and created a QEEG report with energetic calculations for various frequency bands in different regions of the brain. And what G was able to tell me based on that assessment was so accurate in describing what I was feeling at that time in my life around the stress, around the anxiety, around the sleep issues, without me saying anything. I didn't come in and say, hey, I'm dealing with all these things. He didn't know that. So he was able to really derive those insights based solely on the data that was coming off the brainwaves. And not only was it mind-blowing, but it also really convinced me to sign up for sessions and do his program of neurofeedback integrated with psychological exercises and mindfulness practices. And what he has created really goes far beyond the definition of neurofeedback. In my opinion, it's really something new. But I did those 10 sessions with him and it was miraculous. I mean, the stress, the anxiety, the sleep issues were resolved within 10 days. I did them 10 consecutive days of these sessions. And I just had so much energy to show up in any form, in any part of my life, personally, professionally. I would go back into my prior business life and entrepreneurial activities, and it just became so much easier. I was just flowing through everything. I had this almost this like buzz, this like really good vibe that was just persisting through my work and through my personal life. And when I looked at the second brainwave assessment to compare the before and after, I could see some really big changes. And in particular, there was a 90% reduction in one of the subconscious brainwave frequencies that we look at as a biomarker for stress. So it was kind of this objective measurement of the stress that was appearing in my brain, in my nervous system. And that went down by 90% from the first to the last assessment. So that really helped to validate, not that I really needed any validation per se, because I was feeling freaking amazing, but it helped me to understand that there is a very clear correlation between our subjective experience, our feelings, our psychological or mental state, and our brain waves. And I saw that directly on the graph in my last assessment. So that was my first experience.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and let's pause just for a moment. So I will talk to G and ask him a couple of questions, and then we will get on your next experience. So now, G, what did you do during all those years when Chad was traveling, doing meditation, building his traveling business? What did you do so that actually you would be able to provide this first EEG assessment to Chad and help him to start feeling better?
Well, I had a bit of a traumatic life and went through a lot of difficulties. The worst stage of that was in my early 30s. And from that time period, I ended up suffering from 7 years of depression. And I had anxiety issues. And I grew up in an alcoholic home, and had addiction issues myself, and all of the other issues that come up, with living in an alcoholic home. And it was just horrendous. I would spend my days just trying to survive. And then did a lot of studying. I got a lot of help. I went to a lot of different places, and nothing actually helped. I went to psychologists. I went to retreats. I had Reiki. I had acupuncture. I tried medication. I tried it all, and I just couldn't get out of my depression. What did end up happening was every day I would take action and do things, meditate, to be happy by the end of the day. And then I would go to sleep and I would wake up in a deep, dark hole thinking that, I had no reason to live. And, it was difficult. I had 2 children, which kind of kept me alive. Was divorced, going through that. My father died in my arms. My business fell apart. Then inside of all that, I found out my father had betrayed me and signed my name to a bunch of illegal documents. And since I was the last one standing, they went ahead and prosecuted me. So I was indicted and, all sorts of it was just horrific. I was going through so much. And I started helping other people get through trauma because I was getting through, and I had a lot of tools and techniques to find happiness on a daily basis. And yet I was still waking up depressed. And so it was really the beginning of me having a daily morning routine, which is just so valuable for what I like to call mental fitness. And mental fitness leads to psychological well-being on an ongoing basis. And so I was still kind of grappling with this difficulty of waking up depressed every day. And I was working with a psychologist as a counselor, helping other people. And we were also running sober living houses for recovering addicts and alcoholics. So we had 50 beds, and we're doing full psychological treatment as well as recovery treatment, and having great success, doing really well. When I say success, in helping people get better, it wasn't financial. And I found neurofeedback back in 2007. Went and flew out to study with the inventor of a neurofeedback system and stayed there for a couple months, and then brought it back to the practice that I had with the psychologist I was working with. The first thing I did was cure my sleep problem. So I didn't realize I had a sleep problem because I'd go to bed, sleep for 8 hours, and wake up. I had developed a meditation practice that allowed me to sleep no matter what was going on. And I was still in the middle of all my trauma. However, at this point, I was kind of used to trauma. I lived through literally, 15, 20 years of trauma. And I cured my sleep problem because it wasn't a issue of how I went to bed or the pillows or, the blanket, if it was weighted or not weighted. It was really the psychological practice I had when I was sleeping. So no one could tell me. I mean, I did sleep studies. But no one could tell me that there was a problem with my sleep because no one monitors this psychological state of mind while sleeping. Well, I could see that on my own brainwaves, on the EEG graphs that I was getting. So back in 2008, I cured my depression, my sleep issues, and all of those things by studying my own brainwaves and doing EEG and kind of incorporating it with the psychological program that I had built for myself and that I was helping others go through. And so when we brought it back to the practice, I was able to see lifetime we do an initial assessment, which is with the sensors on the scalp. and measuring how the nervous system energy comes in and out of the brain. And the brain is one of the control centers of our nervous system, not the only control center. And, these are things we had to learn along the way. The heart is a huge control center. And so, my connection between my brain and my heart was kind of weak. So one of the things I worked on was getting that fixed, and I learned along the way for myself the brainwave patterns that were associated with how I was feeling, because I got to go in and get on the machine every day. I was also treating other people with the psychologist in our office. And so I got to see the process of change and how people could get better. And by the time I met with Chad and I did that presentation to the entrepreneurial group, I had 1,500 patients come through and done 30,000 sessions with people where I had graphed their brainwaves and I was analyzing their brainwaves so that I could reverse engineer from the EEG and tell people how they were feeling. I never had to ask anymore. And so that's why I made the offer to the group that, hey, come in, get an assessment, and I'll be able to tell you what's holding you back from being the best version of yourself. So, like Chad said, how can you say no to that? So then he came through, and by that time, I had a standardized practice. And so that's what he went through, was that standardized practice. And that was back 2017, I think. And so since then, I'll let Chad tell more of his story. I'll jump back in.
Yes. Thank you very much, G. So, Chad, now it is time for the second part of your story. After you already met with G, you had your assessment, you saw these absolutely stunning results. What happened next?
Yeah, so I actually went back into my former business and continued to work as an entrepreneur in the travel industry for several years. And when more stressful situations would arise, I would go back in for more sessions and really use this as my secret tool that I could rely upon whenever things would get a little bit more difficult. And it was then in 2020, right in the middle of those early days of COVID, 6 months in, where there was a lot of uncertainty, there was a lot of isolation. I was experiencing some real significant loneliness, that I had another mental health challenge. It was a combination of that loneliness and that time for all of us, I think, related to COVID, the uncertainty around it, as well as some additional uncertainty for my business. There was this really binary kind of question that kept coming up that was adding more uncertainty to what was going to happen for us moving forward. And there was also a time where I was drinking alcohol on the weekends and kind of practicing a bit of a work hard, party hard type of lifestyle that had been something that I'd been doing for some time. Certainly in the earlier years, college, to a degree in business school as well. And that all came to a head for me one day. I woke up depressed, and I had never felt depression before. This was something very different from the anxiety and stress that I'd experienced previously. I had always been a pretty happy person for most of my life. And so the feeling of not being able to get out of bed was something I'd heard about. It was so foreign to me. I didn't understand that was possible. And yet here I was one Saturday in that position where I was laying in bed and I could not summon the energy to physically get out of bed. I was stuck. I could not get up. And it was a real wake-up call for me. It was scary. I had some real negative thoughts and really lost control of my thoughts and just had this spiraling negative thought cycle. I was feeling really, really depressed and sad. And so combining that with these negative thoughts, it was very difficult. And it was a real wake-up call that I needed to make a change in my life. And so the first thing that came to mind, I heard a voice in my head, this is not who you're supposed to be. And it was this wake-up call where I kind of became aware of the need to make this change. And so The first change that came to mind was eliminating alcohol from my life, as that was really not serving me in any way anymore. I was in my mid-30s at that point. So I committed to doing that, and I've done that since that point, which is almost 2 years ago now. Feel amazing in terms of that decision. And then also decided to do more brainwave sessions with G, because I knew that at another time in my life, when I was experiencing a really difficult moment from a mental health standpoint, that I was able to experience some miraculous results in a very short amount of time through this method. So I went in to do 10 more sessions, and again, the results were completely transformative. I went in that state of depression. Within a few days, the depression was resolved and I was feeling really good. And I kept going through the next sessions. And then by the time I got to that 10th session and finished up that program, I was just feeling amazing. I mean, it was incredible. I ran into G on that day. He was coming into the office and we started chatting about what we might be able to create together. And the idea came up to create a wearable device that we could use to democratize access to his methodology that had previously only been offered in a clinic at a higher price point, and to really bring the price down and bring it into people's homes so they did not need to go into a clinical setting in order to do this. And that really launched and solidified a partnership between us as we then became co-founders in a new company called Supermind, which is doing just that. We are developing that wearable device and we're bringing it to the world to give people access to this really amazing healing modality that G has created.
Thank you very much, Chad. Now, G, when Chad started talking to you about expanding, about bringing the therapy that you created to a wide range of people, how did it feel to you at the beginning?
Well, it felt fantastic. I have been continuing on this journey that I've been on of helping people conquer their inner demons, so to speak, and really empowering them to be in charge of their nervous system, which, kind of houses everything and helps this human experience function and happen. And for a very long time, really, because I have a belief and an understanding that a big part of the reason why I've been doing this is to help the world do the same thing. I really believe that what we teach at Pathways and Supermind can be taught in first grade. It's that simple. I believe it'd be great if we would learn how to read, write, and run our nervous system, because from there, is the best place to move forward. And so, I, on one hand, I was really flattered and extremely happy. On the other hand, I was celebrating that a big part of my life's purpose was showing up, and the road future was being paved, and that's kind of how I look at it today too.
Yeah. So can you say that you didn't have any doubts? You were not scared about starting new company, about expanding your business. You felt very confident. Or there were some doubts. Yes. Asking for the new entrepreneurs. I know when people are starting, of course, they have something going on inside. It's not that simple. So
a big part of, for me, being mentally fit is being able to live from a state of self-love and love. I can't love others unless I fully self-love myself. So I focus on that. And a big part of that is in training my cells to create their energy from love. So I don't spend much time with fear and doubt anymore. Now, it's a daily practice. I have to be mentally fit for that to actually happen. And so I continue every day with a very stringent morning routine. It's really my daily practice. So if I miss it a couple of days, it doesn't really matter, because I have so many neural pathways now, because I've been doing this now for almost 20 years, where I have a morning routine where I am in training my nervous system to give me energy so I can fully step into who I am. And I knew when Chad was speaking with me about it that this was part of me. And, Chad was showing up to help me move forward to what I really believe is a big part of my journey here. And, that's to help the world, understand and step into who they are. A big part of what's happening in the world is that, Homo sapiens are fear-based pack animals, right? They call Homo sapien packs a tribe. And so the tribal interaction is not a real friendly. And so we don't see a lot of friendly interaction in the world because, unfortunately, the Homo sapien herd and tribal instincts are prevailing. And so many ways that our society helps us develop exacerbates these tribal instincts. And so, we're really seeing tribal instincts gone wild out there in the world. And so, quite frankly, love can have concern. So I did, ask Chad some more questions. However, I just have no doubt that this is a big part of my journey and that Chad was showing up to help me get there. And I just haven't looked back. So.
Yeah, thank you, G. And I think it's very empowering for other people who want to start their businesses, who want to help other people, to know that there are techniques that can help them to overcome and fear and doubt, and with time to train themselves so well that those fear and doubts are even not bothering them anymore. So I think that's very important. So thank you for sharing this. And now about this, your already journey together. You mentioned that you came up with this idea of making the device available to many people. How are you planning to do this? Right now, most of the EEG neurofeedback devices are based in clinics, so you need to come to a certain place where you have your brain waves measured and have a number of sessions. So are you planning to adding offices around the world, or how this will be happening?
Absolutely. Yeah, maybe I could jump into that. So we've done an extraordinary amount of research into the space of the existing EEG devices, clinical model, the sensors that are out there, and we've come up with a plan to create this device that will be able to be utilized through autonomous use. In other words, there's no clinician required and something people can put on themselves. So with that model, which we're developing currently, bring in an amazing team to help with that process from industrial designers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, software engineers. We're also incorporating machine learning into this process, as that can really advance the science of what G has already created. So it's a direct to consumer model that will be done in home. And we'll have support systems built into our app. There'll be a mobile app that will review the concepts, the affirmations, the mindfulness practices that accompany the neurofeedback training through that integrated mind-body intervention. That's what we're well on our way of developing now. So we're deep in it, and we're seeing great progress and have a lot of confidence that we'll be on the market with this device within the next 1 to 2 years, and that people will be able to have this in their homes.
It's great to know that it's coming and it's not such a long time for people to wait. And this is definitely an apparent advantage of your system, that it can be used autonomously by people in different places, and at the same time they will still have support via an app. Maybe, Chi, you can comment on how else the system is different from all existing devices. What are the unique features of the system that can help people?
So as I mentioned earlier, we call what we do neuroempowerment. It's about empowering you to be in charge of your nervous system. So that's really what we're bringing to the world, not a device. The device is just part of the vehicle to allow a person to be able to understand and go through the journey to become neurally empowered at home. Like you said, typically, if you want to get your brain waves read, you have to go to a clinic. And since 2008, I've been providing this through a clinical setting. We have been mapping the journey of standardized change in our system over 2,000 people at this point. So we have a target brainwave pattern set for how the nervous system interacts with the brain for a person to be in charge of their own nervous system. So it isn't a model of the best person in the world. It's not the model of a highly performing person or the model of a Zen, monk or anything like that. It's actually a pattern that allows a person to embody who they are. If they are a monk, this is the pattern that's going to get them to the highest level of monkhood. If they're a businessman, this is going to help them create the energy to go to Wall Street every day and do all the calculations in their head in a sustainable, self-fulfilling, self-loving way. That's really the secret of what we're bringing to the world. And this device is just going to be, the vehicle for it. It's a really important part of the piece because we can't bring it to the world without it. And it's so important that we have such a great team. We do have doctors on staff who are going to be helping us with all of the neurological readings and a full understanding of what this means for health. We're going to have a bank of professionals available. And since I know what the brainwaves are telling us, we'll be able to program this into the wearable. So if there are any issues, there'll be an immediate messaging to us and our support to contact this person and for the person to contact us. So it's going to be, wonderfully safe and just a fantastic journey. I mean, I'm just so excited about how Chad and I have come together to really make this happen.
Yeah, thank you. And Chad, when you decided to start this business with G, when you approached him and started working on it, what were the main differences between your previous traveling business and this one, and how your previous experience actually helped you in this new endeavor?
Yeah, I think I'll pick up on the second part of that question first. So my previous business, I was running a travel company in a very distant destination that was not so familiar to travelers, at least in the United States. That company was in Cuba. So it was started at the time of the diplomatic normalization in 2014, and things changed from there. But what I've noticed as a really clear similarity is taking what is a pretty complicated, complex product and value proposition and really breaking that down in a very succinct, relatable, and understandable way. And so I look at what I did in creating that travel business with the private sector entrepreneurs, which is a whole side of the story of why I did that in a socially conscious manner to create a really sustainable impact there. But very, very complex business model. And the similarity I see in G's product is creating a really relatable and concise narrative of the value proposition. So it's almost like the final frontier analogy, right? Cuba was at that time the final frontier of the travel industry in many respects. I mean, certainly there are a couple other countries that might be more off limits, you could say, to Americans, but those countries may not be very appealing to visit, right? So Cuba was one that people had a lot of interest in visiting, and it was very undiscovered. There was not a lot of information around it. So that educational information was a big part of the value proposition. And I look at this in a similar way. This is the final frontier, in a sense, of physical and mental health and understanding of the brain, and of a mapping of psychology to objectively measured anatomical signals with the EEG sensors. That really hasn't been discovered and brought to the world yet. And so we've had some really incredible discoveries. I should say G has made some incredible discoveries and innovations that need to be explained in a concise, relatable way for our audience of stakeholders, from consumers, investors, strategic partners, and really breaking down these concepts into bite-sized pieces so that people can understand what's actually happening here. How is it possible to have neuroplasticity, for example, right? If we start with neuroplasticity, so we know that the brain can change, We know that when we learn things, there are new neuronal connections in our brains. We actually have a video to see how that process works. It's really cool. So whether you're learning a new language or you're learning how to direct your own nervous system, you're creating new neural pathways in both of those situations. So this kind of educational process as part of the core value proposition of the product to people really understand what's going on here and leading them through that journey in a very relatable, sustainable, and understandable way. I see a very clear connection with what I was doing previously in the final frontier of the travel industry, now maybe the final frontier of the human body and brain and exploration of consciousness. So that was an interesting thing that kind of came through, in the connection between these two businesses. And I think you had a first part of your question. I don't remember what it is right now, but happy to jump into that as well.
Yes. What was the main difference that you noted between building your previous business in travel industry and this neurotech industry? They are different. And for those people who are thinking about creating their startup in neurotech and maybe having some prior experience, just to showcase that difference, if you see one.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, there are definitely differences. The business model is very different. So the travel industry company was very much a cash flow driven, revenue based company with ongoing clients that would sustain the operations. It was not as tech enabled as what we're building now. So it was very much a people business, which is a different organizational structure, different management structure, different strategy. So shifting from a more people-based, cash flow, less scalable to now a more technology-based, right? Technology-based company that is much more scalable. We can reach millions and even billions of people with our vision for this device, which is our vision, and very much more so driven by investor capital in order to fund the development of this technology, and less focused on the monthly cash flow to fund operations. And then as a part of that, the team, the structure, the strategy, the management, the organization is different in a technology business. But I would say for anyone listening that wants to make a shift into neurotech, naturally that has a technological feeling to it. And so would probably be technological in nature. And I would encourage anyone that wants to shift into the tech industry, broadly speaking, that it is very much possible. These are skills that one can learn. These are well-defined organizational management structures. There are amazing books on this stuff. So those resources are all out there, and would encourage anyone that's looking into this field, just from my personal standpoint, that it is so fulfilling and rewarding to really have an understanding of yourself, in a sense, right? This is neurotechnology. So it's an understanding of ourselves as human beings. And I think anyone that goes into the field would appreciate that as well.
Thank you very much, Chad. Very helpful information for those who want to switch and to start working in neurotech. And now, if you maybe both can say something about those people who actually want to work in this neurotech business. You already mentioned that you are inviting a lot of people to work in your company. What are possibilities for people to get employed in this neurotech industry? What skills does this industry require? Maybe even biofeedback-based or neurofeedback-based.
Yeah, absolutely. I can jump in first and then let you continue with any other thoughts. I mean, certainly within the technological field, software programmers are in high demand. So coding is a great skill that is relevant to the field. There's also a hardware component to neurotechnology typically. So there's mechanical engineering, which is how the mechanics of something move, right? And then the electrical engineering is the electrical signals, the boards. And so any expertise in those fields are skills that are really valued in neurotechnology. You also have industrial design, how something is going to look and feel, what the aesthetic of it will be in terms of any devices. So we're kind of seeing the hardware is one category of skills that could be related to industrial design, mechanical and electrical engineering. And then the software as another set of skills, which, software engineering, as I said, product management is one that could cross into both categories. Product management being, the CEO of a product, the product manager is able to coordinate all the moving pieces and ensure that the features are delivered upon by the engineers. And then within more of a specialty expertise around software programming, something like neurofeedback is a very specific type of coding and programming. And so neurofeedback software programming is a skill that could be valuable in this field. And I'm sure there are other specific niche skills like that for other forms of neurotechnology, maybe fMRI or TMS. It's a very broad field. So I'm sure that there are software capabilities that are unique to those other modalities in the same way that neurofeedback is for us. So yeah, the technical skills are kind of what I'm hitting on. But of course, as with any field, managerial skills, financial and accounting skills, HR, operations, you have a whole infrastructure of support and organization around these functions. And people with those skills can also find jobs in the field.
Yeah, that's really a broad spectrum. So people can come from different fields and join this field and bring the value. What we're trying to emphasize in these podcasts, that people with different backgrounds can work in neurotech
and clinical backgrounds too. Right? Physicians, psychiatrists, neuroanatomists. I mean, there's the physiology and there's the psychology. So it's body and mind. And those are different fields of medicine. And those are both related to neurotech.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why I wanted to talk to G about this, because G, I know that you brought uniqueness into this neuro empowerment project, which is neurofeedback based, because you looked at everything not just from neurophysiology perspective, but you also added your expertise working with people with mental illnesses. So how did that contribute to the development of your new product, and what do you see options for people in clinical field to contribute to the development of neurotech devices?
So let me start off by saying that my first career was in the insurance business. I was a salesperson into my 30s, and then I shifted into clinical practice in psychology, and then I shifted into the neuroscience. So yes, pretty much anybody can get into this. The field of neuroscience and the applicability to the consumer is extremely in its infant stage right now. And so there is going to be so much development coming that the possibilities are just amazing. I mean, it's just a great field to get into. It's a great field to develop. And in our research to build our device, quite frankly, the industry in neurofeedback is very limited in their understanding of the psychological side. So the more that people in psychology and mental health, psychiatry, neurologists can get together with the neuroscience side of the world and the industry, the better. And I believe a lot of that's coming. It's not just from the brain. There's a lot of neurological devices and technology for the neurological activity on the body. So, I mean, everything is just being born. I mean, there's a lot of blooming and blossoming and nurturing and growing that's going to happen over the next 20, 30 years. And even after that, of course. However, this is going to be a big part of all of it. And technology becoming a part of the old processes is extremely important for the progress of the world. And obviously, the progress of mental health and psychological well-being is extremely important as we continue to develop the world. So, I mean, this is just a great opportunity for anybody who wants to get into this field. I think it's really the time. There's a lot of neuroscience that's coming into the consumer-based businesses. However, there's a lot more that's going to happen very, very soon in the next couple of decades. So.
Yes, this brings me to my next question of how both of you see the development of this technology, let's say 20, 50 years from now. How do you see even neurofeedback industry at that time point?
Well, I believe that we will fundamentally change the landscape of the neurofeedback industry with our products, and we'll bring a new understanding to how to integrate psychological exercises to be performed simultaneously with the neural therapy, the neurofeedback. And I also believe that there will be a propensity for people to prefer a non-invasive brain computer interface, meaning that they would have a preference for something like neurofeedback over an implantable chip. That's my personal belief. We'll see where we are 20 years from now, and we'll listen back on this podcast, and it'll be an interesting comparison point. But the point I'm making is that neurofeedback is extremely safe and non-invasive, and you're listening to music. Essentially, these are just sound frequencies, the music of your mind. So it's very inviting in that respect. And when we look at the landscape as a whole within neurotechnology, and you hear about the development of these implantable chips, and to me, it's sci-fi stuff that maybe will never catch on because it is a little bit, I think, scary for people to have a chip implanted into their brain and then have that hooked up to some mainframe system, and can definitely understand that there would be benefits to that individually and societally. But I believe that it's important for there to be a non-invasive option of really expanding, elevating the human experience. So we kind of take a step back and look at what's the point of neurotechnology, right? What would be the point of a chip to be implanted in the brain? What's the reason for that? And one reason that comes to mind is to help us to grow and improve as human beings and to expand our potential and our flourishing in this world. And so if we can do those things without an implant, without a chip, we can do it in a non-invasive way and really allow humans to advance their abilities, expand their consciousness, expand their capabilities, which, we call it Supermind for a reason, right? This is what we're offering, is the ability to tap into resources that we have in our sub and unconscious that are not available to us because of imbalances. And so my point is just that I think neurofeedback, as we are providing it, will become a very well-known household application and will be the non-invasive way of advancing ourselves as a species, rather than the invasive option of a chip or other means. So I just think neurofeedback, will become really widely known within the next 20 years, and there will still be different ways to do it. But our method, I believe, will be the predominant way and will be very instructive to clinicians and providers. And as we create this platform for people to utilize the discoveries we've made, really also offer the ability for others to contribute and to improve the protocols with decentralized contributions. So it's an exciting time. And I think the core of your question is, my answer is neurofeedback will be one of the things that really shifts the human experience over the next 20 years.
I get to jump in here. I want you to imagine you get up in the morning and your bed is telling you, which is already happening, how you slept. You go into the bathroom, and as you walk on the bathroom floor, it's weighing you, and you've walked into your smart bathroom, and you go to the bathroom and it analyzes your excrements. You go to the mirror and it reads your brain waves and it says, "Good morning, Milena. It looks like when you were sleeping, a childhood trauma has caused you to not be so happy today. Would you like to hear some tones to elevate how you're feeling?" And then as you go into your kitchen, and your kitchen is reading your brain waves and says, "Oh, it looks like today you want pancakes. Let me make you some pancakes." And they just suddenly appear. And then when you get in your car's like, "Good morning, Milena. It looks like you're feeling very harried and you're in a hurry today. Can I play some tones to help you understand that, we can just get to your work at the same speed as we can every day? And so let's enjoy the process instead of worrying about what time we get there. So that is my vision of the future of neurofeedback and neuroscience in our lives.
That's an amazing picture. We will put this recording into our sneak peek before the podcast is published. So make people interested in what we are talking about. Thank you. Thank you very much. And now, one more question. Our podcast is called Neurocareers Doing the Impossible. And I ask this question to all of our guests. If some people who are listening to us want to start their career in neurotech, or they have this amazing idea and they want to implement it by creating their startup, but they have doubts that it's impossible. What would be your suggestion to those?
Well, I can jump in first on this one. Well, first, I would say, as someone who's gone through some really significant self-doubt, part of that is part of the process. And so it can maybe be expected to a degree that there is doubt there, and that's normal. That's okay, right? That's part of the process of trying something new that's uncertain and unknown. And so just with that as a starting point, that's okay. That's okay. We don't have to try to push that away. We know that it's there. Then I would say that you, as an individual listening, are capable of extraordinary things beyond your wildest dreams. And as someone who has experienced that through the doubt and come out on the other side, I am extremely confident that that is a quality that resides within every single human being. And so there's a resilience there that you can tap into, and you only live once, right? As they say, YOLO. So if you have a dream that is impossible or feels hard to reach, but it's a dream that you wake up with every day and it's something that is a burning passion for you to explore, go for it. Go for it. And the lessons that learned along the way will be as valuable or even more valuable than the quote success that you're anticipating is the reason for this. So take the journey, try to value every step along the way, understand that each experience you have, whether it's a positive one or a challenging one, is here to serve you, and there's a lesson to be learned, which is in of itself extremely valuable, and to go for it. My predisposition was always to go for the challenge, go for the unknown, try to do the impossible, because I preferred that risk over the feeling of regret later in life. So that was just my personal calculus with it. I don't suggest that should be everyone's, because people have their own risk-reward analysis and preferences. But I would encourage people that are capable of perhaps far more than they are aware or they can imagine, and to really just go for it if it is a dream.
Thank you so much, Chad. That's very empowering. I got empowered listening to you. So thank you. G, do you have anything to add to what Chad already said?
Well, I really like Milena, and I want to thank you for what you're doing, because I would not have been able to be where I am today without moving forward when people told me that what I was doing was impossible. What I was thinking I could do was impossible. And I just went ahead and steamed ahead, because like Chad said, if you have this idea you keep waking up with, you got to go for it. It's part of who you are if you're waking up that way all the time. So I would say it's time to step into who you are and really fully embody that. Because when you do that, amazing things happen. And along the way, I mean, really for the last 15 years, people have continuously told me that what I'm doing is impossible. I mean, I have mapped the code of consciousness. So, I mean, I've created a numerical scaling of the mind. And my original mentor said to me, you can't do that. The mind is a concept. It's not a thing. I'm like, well, let me see, And so here we are mapping the mind on a daily basis. So from your mind mapper to your ears, follow your dream. And amazing things will happen, even if you don't fulfill the dream. Amazing things have happened in my life along the way that I still celebrate every day. And, I love how you're helping people see that, Melina. Thank you. Because I wish I kind of heard you 10 years ago when I was battling all these people telling me what I'm doing is impossible.
Thank you. Thank you very much, G. That's an amazing advice. And now to those who are interested in what you do, maybe somebody wants to contribute, maybe somebody has questions, somebody wants to collaborate or even work with you, how they can find information about you and how they can connect with both of you.
Absolutely. So we have two websites to mention. One is supermind.us. That's for the company that's building the wearable, as we've discussed. And the other one is pathwaveslife.com. That is G's Wellness Center, where he's had over 2,000 people go through this process, of which I was one of those people several times. So those are great sources of information to understand some of the concepts we've been speaking about today. And if they'd like to email me, they can email me at chad.olin, OLIN, at supermind.us. And G can be emailed at g.cole, COLE, at supermind.us. And people can also submit forms on either of these two websites. I would welcome them to do that. If anyone listening wants to collaborate in any way, we are open for collaboration, for connection, whether it's someone looking for a career in this field or a clinician or a psychologist or a neurologist that's curious about some of the concepts that we presented today. We are very open to explaining further and demoing what we've got going on. So we welcome people to come visit our office in Miami and would be interested in reaching out with anyone that is interested to connect.
Thank you very much, Chad. And we will add this information in our podcast notes as well for all our listeners who want to connect. Thank you so much for this amazing podcast. I am personally looking forward to trying your device in 2 years and learning how to self-regulate my brain and empower my brain to succeed even more. So, and of course, looking forward to seeing how your device is helping many people around the world. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, Melina, you can also go to supermind.us and you can pre-order a device.
Oh, I didn't know about that. So that's very good to know. And for me and to our listeners, thank you.
Yes, you can tell your listeners if they really want to help the world become a love-based place, which is what we're working on, to jump on there and pre-order a device today.
Very good. Very good. Thank you so much, G. Thank you.